Hey friends, I'm Ash.
I'm Elle.
We are Lovey Cosplay.
This is Shenanigans Cosplayers Say, and I am no longer dying.
Oh,
Finally. Not dying. Finally.
You have been healed.
Yes, apparently I needed a dose of antibiotics because I had a massive sinus infection that none of the doctors believed I had until I, had 102 fever and, all of that stuff. So, could have probably been, earlier on if I had been listened to, but hey.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good because I'm also getting better with my chronic illness because it turns out it was probably a medication I was taking.
No.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate because it was the ADHD anxiety med that actually worked.
No.
I know. So Elle's brain's a bit of a hot mess right now because I have nothing.
Boo.
Yeah. So now we have con crunch and I don't have ADHD or anxiety meds right now. So
Boo.
send me good vibes, friends, because I'm struggling because I have 2 performances that we can't talk about that I'm trying to prepare for in the next 8 weeks.
Every day we're struggling.
That I'm a month and a half behind on from where I would have wanted to be because I was sick. I also learned that you can't practice outside with silk fans when it's really windy out.
No. Say it isn't so.
I tried and they just kept smacking me in the face, and then I had to go in my hot garage because my house is so crowded that there's not enough of an open, it's not so much the height, it's just open space in general for me to try to practice anything indoors, and I am now realizing why it's always just been musical comedy. Because I don't have to have anything that extends beyond my body, and I can practice inside.
But the real question is, did you get any video proof of the wind smacking you in the face with your fans?
Probably, because I did have my, camera on, but it took literally, I think I was out there for maybe 3 minutes. I went, this isn't working. But the problem with trying to record in my garage is it's not big enough for me to get a big picture of what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what, the entrance I'm trying... So this is the pain in the ass of directing yourself is you have to record yourself and then go back and then change it and go back. But in my garage, unless I take all the cars out, there's not a great way to, get a whole picture of what even a small stage would look like so I can see what I'm doing. So it's outside, it's easier to see what you're doing, but then you have to deal with the elements, like when we were rehearsing for ICL and they kept knocking our set over.
Yes.
So I got very frustrated. It gets very hot in the garage, too, because I can't leave the door open because the wind problem will still occur.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, right, I guess I'm not rehearsing this for as long as I wanted to. And I'm just very frustrated in general because I didn't want to crunch, and I'm being forced to because I was sick. So now I have to crunch performances, crunch Steed's coat, crunch all these things because I was sick and I couldn't do anything.
The universe is mad.
Basically, I could use a break right now. That'd be great if some of this would work out. And I'm trying to resist the urge to either 1, drop out, or 2, switch to the safety net. And I'm trying to force myself to do something that is not my performance safety net.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, my brain right now wants to just switch to my performance safety net and be done because it's a safety net and it will go well and it's easy. But that's not going to help me as a performer if I keep doing things that I already know will go well and are easy. So
right.
It's
I get it.
Luckily, the fan performance isn't a high stakes deal.
But it's good that you're getting the practice in something that you wanted to do that you haven't really had a chance to expose yourself to before.
Yes. I mean, the audio sounds really good. I'm resisting the urge to drop the props altogether and just do a straight stage thing. I'm like, no, that wasn't the point. The whole point was to force myself to use this prop and find a way to use it. That was the whole exercise.
Mm-hmm.
No, you cannot. The other prop I'm learning to use is shockingly easier, which you wouldn't think that it would be, but I think it's because I knew how to do it before.
Okay.
Granted, it's been 20 years since I've used a color guard flag. But it kind of comes back a little. And I was hoping to do tosses. I'm not going to be able to. I don't have enough time to practice. So luckily, that's a very, very, very small part of the performance. And the rest of it is, or at least is more in our traditional wheelhouse.
Sure.
But then I realized we have a third performance we have to prep. Because we're also supposed to have a new closer for our live show. But that's also an old performance that we're bringing back.
It'll be okay.
8 weeks. Panic.
Nah.
I'm sure once it starts falling together in the next couple of weeks, it won't feel so bad.
Sure.
Now that I'm not sick. So.
Yes.
Hopefully.
So just keep with that. No more illness.
No more illness.
It's not allowed.
Hopefully, no more illness. Knock on wood. I just got my flu shot today. I'll get my COVID one next week. So that it's nice and good for the busy that is October through November. Because, wow, I have something literally every weekend in October almost.
Ew.
They're short things. They're not like all day things.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. But there are things that I've wanted to do that haven't happened because I've been sick for so long.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there's a new Anything Goes open mic night at the local theater.
That'll be fun.
I want to see what that looks like because they're telling me I can do what we do there, and I don't know that I believe them. So I want to go look first.
Sure.
And the yearly Halloween shoot is next weekend. So the local photographers in our area once a year hold a community photo shoot at one of the nearby parks. I've never been able to make it. This year it is on a day I can actually go. So I'm going to try to pull Oogie out and go.
Good.
So just trying to do some stuff. Not hide in this house. Not that I had a choice from like June to now, but hey, it's okay.
But hey.
That's okay. But at least the one thing we're not dealing with right now is high stakes competition stress.
Nope.
And we're going to talk about one of the factors that causes some of that, which is people's lack of understanding of what is a fact versus an opinion. Now, if you've listened to our other episodes, you know we've attempted to record this multiple times, and it has not worked out.
Yeah.
I think part of that is because it's a really difficult topic to talk about. I also know, based on what happened after the sandbagging episode, we're going to get a lot of DMs and a lot of comments, and so it's preparing for the aftermath of this episode. Mentally. So if we do not respond to you or whatnot, chillax. There will be something that we will share with you at the end that you can submit additional questions, comments, so that we can do a follow-up to this, because I have a feeling there will be a follow-up to this episode.
And if you have any good stories as it relates to this topic, we obviously want to hear them. And I would love to hear some of your own experiences with either things that you yourself have experienced or witnessed with people who are not necessarily understanding the difference between fact and opinion. So,
well, and apparently it's not exactly an uncommon thing for people to not understand what the difference is.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was actually a research study done in 2018 where only 26% of those surveyed were actually able to correctly classify the differences. Like, they couldn't...
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, like, people couldn't get it. They didn't really understand what the difference was. And we are going to talk a little bit about why that happens and why those big emotions get attached to those opinions. And you're going to see those a lot, especially... related to competitions. So you see this in a lot of different areas, but we are relating this mostly to the sandbagging episode and competing. So what is a fact? A fact is information that can be verified to be true or false. No gray area. It's true or it's false. That's it.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! It is objective. It is possible. It is known. It is unbiased. And you cannot debate it. That is a fact. There's no flexibility. There's no wiggle room. It just is. There are a lot of people that try to say that certain facts are opinions. I can think of many of those that we dealt with in the last, 3 to 4 years.
Uh,
But those are the stipulations for fact. Now, an
Yes.
opinion can be somebody's belief or personal judgment that leaves space for you to agree or disagree. So opinions usually involve emotional language. There's feeling, there's stakes behind them. They typically come from beliefs, past experiences, personal boundaries, culture, background, those type of influences. They're typically a personal view, they can be subjective, and they're not always possible. This is when someone uses what you call an absolute. So if someone says, like, never, can't,
gotta be careful
must,
using those absolutes.
because unless it's some sort of an established rule, if there's variability, it's going to be an opinion. So, like, if a contest says you cannot recompete with a costume that has won an award, that is a fact, even though it's an absolute. But if someone just says that in general, it's an opinion. And that's the big one that you see most of the time, I would say.
Yes. Now, obviously, like, people can do things, but then they are violating the rule. Like, that's the point. but if it's not a rule, and somebody just says it, then that person is incorrect, and that is their opinion, is that person shouldn't do that, but they absolutely can if it's not written down.
Right. Because rules are facts for that specific competition. They are not facts for some other competition, however. And I think that's where people get really tripped up. It's like, well, at this contest that I went to, in September, they had X rule, so this is a rule for contests. That's not how that works. Like, every contest has its own rules, which is why we always say, read the rules.
But what if I can't read?
Have someone else read them to you.
Excellent.
Yes.
What if I don't know what the words mean?
Then have someone explain it to you. There are options.
Dictionaries.
And that's the thing with rules in contests. They're facts. You can choose to disagree with it, but it doesn't change that it is. It just is.
So valid.
It just is. It is.
Yep.
It is what it is. And I know all of you who are contest coordinators who are listening to this right now are shaking your heads going, oh, but they try. They try so hard to debate with us about our rules and how there should be flexibility in them. They are rules for a reason.
They are rules. And if you don't understand the rules, to follow up on the topic that Elle just brought up, the best person to explain to you how those rules should be interpreted if you do not understand them word for word, and the only person that can actually clarify it for you with any merit is going to be the contest coordinator. Not somebody else who read them, not somebody else who agrees with you, not somebody else who did the contest 10 years ago. The coordinator that is the representative of the contest is the only person that can accurately explain that to you if you do not understand it. Everybody else is just kind of hearsay.
Kind of off of that, one of the things you're going to see a lot is people going onto Facebook groups and asking about rules and things in relationship to a specific contest. And the first response is always, ask the contest coordinator. But typically what these people are looking for is for someone to validate their dislike of a rule and their desire to bend it.
Or just flat out ignore it.
Or yes, but they want someone to validate their opinion.
So that it's okay, quote unquote, that I did this because they told me so.
Which is why you'll see a lot of people who will argue back and forth about like, well, but blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it doesn't matter that you won an award at Dinky Con and this is a bigger con. If the rule says no, the rule says no. Like, that's just how it is. Or you feel that this rule is unfair because you want to bring this fan art piece to this contest. Okay, but it doesn't matter because the rule says you can't. That's just how it is. That's the way it goes. But people like to turn their opinions, or as we all also know them, as unwritten rules into facts, specifically for contests. So an unwritten rule could be something that is sort of socially understood. A lot of times you cannot compete with a costume that's already won an award, kind of falls in that category. People really want that to be the, like, social unwritten rule. But
only in the States.
But only in the States. I personally don't agree with that.
Nobody else cares.
I don't agree with that opinion, but that's just me. But a lot of contests do. But you cannot fault someone for recompeting in a costume if the contest didn't have that rule just because you don't like it. So then people try to pull the unwritten rule card of, well, socially, that's like a bad luck. You shouldn't do that.
And I find it just so interesting in our community in particular, because there are so many people that are neurodivergent in the cosplay community who need those written rules to possibly understand some of those, like, things that should or should not be socially acceptable. So if it's not written down and they violate it, it might not be because they're trying to, sandbag or one up on somebody or just, milk this costume that they got. It might be because they genuinely think it's okay, because on paper it is completely okay. So my biggest suggestion for anybody that has those unwritten rules in their geographic area or local communities would be to petition the actual contest to make it a written rule instead, because then everybody's on the same page.
Well, and speaking of neurodiversity, one of the other issues that you see in this fact versus an opinion, and it falls on both sides, both with rules but also opinions, is something called justice sensitivity. And a lot of neurodivergent people have difficulty when others break rules, whether they be official rules or what they feel are social rules. And so you'll see people get really upset when someone else breaks a rule, even when it doesn't impact them. And sometimes that has to do with this justice sensitivity, this overwhelming need to make sure that justice is served.
That's so interesting. I mean, I've seen that all the time, but I didn't know what the name of it was.
It's kind of a new concept that they're talking about with ADHD and autism in particular.
Okay.
But basically, it can be triggered by either societal or rules. It doesn't have to be like specific rules. It can be things like you shouldn't compete with a costume that's already won an award. Someone who's neurodivergent has a tendency to be more sensitive and to perceive those injustices more frequently. Sometimes that has to do with how much injustice that person has experienced, because neurodivergent persons are more likely to experience injustice to themselves, particularly at a younger age. Some of it is the intensity of emotion that is typically felt by neurodivergent individuals, but it's also that difficulty with cognitive flexibility. So black and white thinking is very common in a neurodivergent individual, particularly with autism. And so a rule is a rule. And when someone breaks the rules, it's really frustrating because their brain has a hard time wrapping around why that changed. I have this problem, as well, in some instances where, something wasn't clearly stated, or like, this is a rule, but other people are getting to break it at work and it'll drive me nuts. I'm like, no, that's a rule. It's supposed to be this way. This is the way you're supposed to do it. So neurotypical people don't see rules even as black and white. They often see them as shades of gray and flexible, where neurodivergent individuals will see rules as this is the rule. Which is why, I almost always have to get things clarified, verbatim from a contest coordinator to make sure I'm understanding the rule 100%, because I don't want to break it. Because I will worry too much about breaking the rule when 9 times out of 10, the rule isn't as strict as it seems. But you're going to see people want to defend, whether it be a societal opinion that they hold very strongly to, or a specific rule, because their brain has a hard time with this justice sensitivity. So And you see both. I mean, I see people who yell all the time online about, but the rule is this, the rule is this, and they broke the rule, and then this person was allowed to do this, and they broke the rule, and it was so terrible. And sometimes it's not even anybody in the contest. It's just like, the coordinators let them break the rule, and then they won an award, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, who cares? It's not that big a deal. It's a small problem.
First world problems.
Right. But you see this most often around the you shouldn't recompete with a costume that's already won an award.
Now, if you're in the contest and somebody violates a rule and wins an award, I understand being frustrated because you held yourself to that standard and you followed all the rules and they're being awarded despite not following the rules. I mean, I get that, but yeah, justice sensitivity. I can see that. Well, and I did policy at my job for like 5 years. Everything was policy based and making sure that we were doing what we are supposed to do and what we wrote down on paper that we said we were going to do. I can definitely see how people would get fixated on some of those things. Now, I luckily did not have like that strong personal belief of, the sky is falling or what have you around that, because I probably would not have been able to function at work since my entire job was helping develop the policy and then auditing it. So I'm like, this is not a reflection on me if we are not doing what we said that we are going to be doing, because I'm not the person that is actually making the choice to do it or not. That is a reflection on them, or the policy is poorly written by, corporate or what have you. And not taking it personal was very, very hard to not do, though. And probably because I did it for so long is the only reason I got out of that cycle. But in the beginning, definitely.
Well, yeah, because it was your work. So
right. It's my job.
Right.
Like, this is all surrounding my job. And my job is 100% based on policy, which that is our rule at work. This is our fact.
Follow my rules.
Yeah. Actually, my favorite thing was, I just write them. I don't sign them. You need to talk to the person that actually approved this. Yeah.
So our number one question that we got after the sandbagging episode was, why do people act like their opinion is a fact? By far, besides people just arguing with us about whether or not things we talked about were facts or opinion, because I can't tell you how many DMs I have of people arguing with us about the difference. The thing with opinions is there's a sense of emotion behind them that drives somebody to want to protect that belief system. And this has a lot to do with cognitive dissonance. When you disrupt someone's deep-rooted beliefs, it causes almost like a short circuit, and they can't wrap their heads around the concept. Which is also why, even when presented with facts that are irrefutable, people won't change their opinion. They will continue with their opinion. And then they will go online and they will seek validation through something called confirmation bias.
You see this with politics all the time.
So a lot of the information that I got for this particular topic came from politic type articles and psych, obviously. My friend Psychology Today, of course, was involved. But yes,
I mean, of course.
So we've heard about confirmation bias in relationship to like politics. I mean, you hear that all the time. You see people defending irrefutable facts because of politics all the time. Especially, in the United States. You see it constantly. So what confirmation bias allows to have happen is it allows people to continue their belief with others who share the same belief. That shared belief creates that confirmation, which then keeps the belief going. Beliefs don't come from deep understanding. They come from like the group think concept that we've talked about before. They come from how much support you get from the group for the belief. So the more that people support it, the stronger it becomes, and the more it seems like a fact. Which is why you cannot compete with a costume that has already won an award, often comes off as a fact.
Because those people are going to go into those communities online, whether it's for their local contest community, regular cosplay community, Instagram followers or contest groups, and they're going to ask those questions. And like we talked about a few minutes ago, they're trying to get those beliefs validated by the rest of the group. So as long as there are people agreeing with them, then that's just going to lend back into their confirmation bias. Because obviously everyone that agrees with them is right and everybody that disagrees with them is wrong.
Well, and human beings in particular have a really hard time with being wrong. I'm sure we all know that person who just can't be wrong. I can't say that that's a fact. There might be somebody who doesn't know a person that just can't be wrong. But I would say that it's probably pretty safe to say most of us can, like, if you think of the person that always has to be right, you probably have someone pictured in your head of who that person is. And that has a lot to do with, like we mentioned, cognitive dissonance. So what happens is when you have deep emotional attachment to an idea that is part of your sense of self and worldview, you need that consistency in your beliefs, and it helps kind of maintain that consistency in life. So when that gets challenged, it causes your brain distress, because basically how your life has been formatted is being challenged, which is how they rationalize a lot of beliefs. And all those wild things that we've experienced for 4 years all comes from cognitive dissonance. It's like if you were presented with something that deeply challenges how you were brought up, and then you have two options. You can fight it, or you can learn and see what you learn. And a lot of people put a wall up and go, no, this is how it is, because they can't handle that change, that mental flexibility and that change for themselves.
Yeah, I'm automatically thinking of pretty much any time someone in our age group argues with somebody in our parents' age group, and then they're like, okay, boomer.
Yep, this is okay, boomer. Yeah.
This is okay, boomer. This is exactly what that is.
Yes, our parents' generation has a really hard time with flexibility around their thoughts and opinions. That cognitive dissonance is tough. And it does tend to be more difficult to have mental flexibility as you get older. You are more likely to be more flexible mentally in your younger years, probably because it's not as ingrained. But there are also other things that make it difficult with accepting being wrong. People with fragile egos, narcissism, poor mental health, poor self-esteem. The list goes on. Kind of another part that happens with our neurospicy friends, which I, at some point, should just do a poll of how many of our listeners are neurospicy, because I'm going to guess the number's pretty high, because the number's pretty high in the cosplay community in general. But I bet there's some of you out there who find yourself doing the opposite of all of this, because you've been taught not to share your opinion. A lot of times either your opinion was not what the popular opinion was, or your opinions weren't socially acceptable, so you just kind of learned to not say anything. And that has a lot to do with neurodivergent individuals being more upfront and direct. And they may say what they actually see, when in reality, that's not what everybody's trying to do. Or they misunderstand the conversation. If people are gossiping, this is a big one. Let's say you've got a bunch of people hanging around the water cooler, so to speak, and they're gossiping about a coworker's inability to do XYZ, and you come up into the conversation and you give a rational reason for why they're doing XYZ, those other people are going to get mad at you, because that's not what they want. They want you to validate their opinion that they're having right now and join in their commiseration and gossip.
Mm-hmm.
And so that tends to happen a lot because those social cues are not picked up on, and then you learn to just not say anything. This is also why neurodivergent people tend to be very hyper aware of what to say and not to say, but also of rules, because you're very worried about doing the wrong thing.
I like it.
Yes. So we have justice sensitivity, but then sometimes we have the opposite issue of just being socially sensitive in general, because trauma.
Or you have the people that have justice sensitivity, but it's been beaten out of them, so they are silently brooding about it.
That's me.
Because they don't want to say the thing, but they're feeling it in their soul.
That's 1,000% me. Because I was taught to keep my mouth shut because I was going to say the wrong thing, which is why I still will stew after like social gatherings about whether or not I said the right thing. Because I'm that person who after a social gathering will go home and review literally everything I said and panic about it. It's gotten better, but you know.
Well, I'm glad that it's gotten better.
Social anxiety's fun. So what do we do? Because obviously we're not going to change people's minds about their opinions.
So the thing to remember when you're talking to somebody about things like this is, yes, I would always encourage somebody to be like, hey, here's, because we're talking specifically about contests in this particular instance, but in general, I mean, the theory kind of goes across any topic you're talking about. I mean, you can provide things that are, you know, those written irrefutable facts so that, you know, maybe you'll feel better about like, hey, at least I did my due diligence. And I said, oh, here's a copy of these rules that say the thing, that is clearly the fact. And they might still argue with you about it. You can offer them other resources, like other people, like you should talk to this person. This person wrote these rules, or is the person who gets to interpret these rules. They're the only person that can actually help you with your problem, or if you want to see this change to what you think it should be. And they might still argue with you. Ultimately, you need to make the decision for your own peace of mind and your own self if it's going to be worth it to continue engaging on this particular topic. Because you know that you're right and they know that they're right. And there's no middle ground. If you are both dealing in absolutes where this is the absolute truth and they believe that their opinion is the absolute truth, there's not really, you're going to have to agree to disagree ultimately, or just move on from the conversation. Hopefully, if it's somebody you're close with, you can kind of circle around it and just recognize that obviously this is a very strongly held belief for this person. If it's not somebody that you particularly care about, depending on how the conversation goes, you might choose not to interact with that person anymore. But ultimately, you need to take care of your own mental health.
So then for our contest coordinators who might be thinking this, because this is also the dangerous opinions that you run into as a coordinator, what do you do in a crisis with a belligerent contestant whose opinion is that they should have won?
Well,
because this was also a question that we got was, okay, so what do I do with the belligerent contestant that thinks they should have won or that the rules don't apply to them?
So obviously you can talk to the person, and my recommendation, and it's going to depend on how much you feel like you are able to give into this conversation. Obviously, if you're a contest coordinator, you are likely representing an organization or a convention of some sort, so you do not want to be unprofessional with your contestants. I totally get that. Regardless of what you say, they're probably going to complain about you on the internet. That is not your fault. That's just, it is what it is. So if you have the time, my recommendation for you would be to talk to the contestant and validate their feelings, because remember, they are coming from an emotional place at this particular point in time. Go ahead and label some of the things that they're thinking. You know, obviously they are, frustrated or disappointed, and talk them through it. Ultimately, I would try to figure out what it is that they're hoping to get out of this conversation. Because obviously, if the contest is over and the awards have already been divvied or what have you, you can't go back and change that after the fact. So them having this conversation with you is not going to magically get them an award. So I don't think it's out of line to just ask, what is it that you are looking for out of this conversation? You can validate their feelings, that they feel frustrated or they feel like it was unfair. You can ask them about their opinions. You know, if they have feedback to give you, if they believe that the judges were truly being inappropriate in some fashion or unprofessional in some way, you know, as a representative of the organization, that is information that you do need to know if that is something that had occurred. So you can obviously take that feedback from them and tell them that you're going to look into it and talk to your superiors about it, because potentially, and it might be a completely separate issue if something happened with this particular contestant or might have happened with other contestants. That's something that you do need to know going forward. And yeah, just seeing what the core root of, you know, is the whole point of their conversation just that they want to vent? Is that what the problem is? Is it something where they didn't like this particular judge and they don't think that that person should be judging for whatever reason? Is it something where they don't like the way that a rule was implemented or interpreted? And is it something that you potentially need to look at changing? Is there something that happened that was outside of necessarily the contest scope, but was a bigger issue at the convention? Like, did a stagehand set their props down wrong and then their prop fell apart on stage? And are they blaming the stagehand for that? Well, if that's the case, is that one of those things where maybe going forward in the future, we need to look at our processes to see if there's something that we can change to prevent it from happening again? So I would try to take this person who's obviously very passionate about this particular subject at this exact point in time and ask them what they would like to see and how, as a contest, you think that it can be improved in the future. So it's not you know, ripping away your best in show from your best in show person and giving it to this person instead, but trying to get past the emotional words they're using, and some of that emotional language that they're saying to what the actual core issues are. And if that's something that needs to be addressed at a basic level for your contest for all contestants and not just this person. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. Because I think people just don't know what to do with people when they come at you like that. And I have found that, unfortunately, there's usually at least one.
Well, and if it's one of those things, like, let's say the room's clearing out and you legitimately just do not have the time, I would make a point to talk to that person and say, I hear you. I would like for us to continue this conversation. Unfortunately, we have to clear the room and I'm required to be at this meeting. Like, but when is a time that we can chat? And you don't have to give them like your personal phone number or anything like that. If you want to, that's up to you. I'm not going to tell you to do that. I would never give random strangers, especially ones that are mad at me, my personal phone number. But, you know, you can take down their contact information and, you know, ask them when's a good time for us to talk about this. Because it does and make sure that you follow up. Because if you say, I would like for us to talk about this, pick a date and time and make that contact with them. Giving them the time is going to allow them to calm down from those high emotions immediately following the contest or at whatever point that they're escalated. Time is your friend. So if you can't talk to them until the next day, for example, or maybe you're going to meet outside the coffee shop in the convention hotel at, 10:30, because that's when you're available, I would go down there and just hang out and send them a DM on social media. They probably have your Instagram or whatever, and say, hey, I'm here, and make that point to sit down and have a conversation with them. And again, this is all going to be based on your timeline and your schedule. But if you're really wanting to potentially turn this into like a positive experience for everybody involved, blowing off the person isn't going to do that.
Well, and there's a good chance that 9 times out of 10, they aren't going to want to talk to you later anyway. They just want to yell at someone because they're mad right
it could
now.
Be.
I mean, that
Possibly.
just seems to be how it rolls. Because usually they're not going to be in a headspace to have a reasonable conversation with you immediately following the contest.
It might even turn into one of those things where maybe, the next morning they're like, hey, I'm sorry for the way that I acted. But once you get past that emotional level, it allows you to actually maybe see what some of the real issues are and then potentially address those. Because I'm not saying that everybody that gets upset about a contest is wrong for being upset about the contest, because there are things that happen. I've been in contests where people have said that the stagehands broke their props. That's why I use the example. I mean, there have been instances where tech screwed up and the audio was out of order, or where the microphone kept cutting out when they were trying to do something live. Things happen all the time. That's just the way that it goes. Are these things that we could address, and are these things that we could prevent going forward to make the experience better for everybody?
I'm sure some of you are still going, but that thing's a fact. So if you want to challenge your fact versus opinion knowledge, we've made a little quiz. So you can follow the Google form link to take our quiz. It will be anonymous, so we won't know who took what, but it will bounce your score back to you. And there is also a section where you can ask additional questions, or if you feel like you need to vent after taking it, you're more than welcome to do so on this form. I would prefer to keep these things to this form so our DMs are not blowing up again. But you're also welcome to leave comments on the Instagram post with additional questions, comments in relationship to this episode. We are more than happy to do a follow-up to answer any additional questions for this topic, which we are assuming we are going to get, because it is a very hefty and involved concept.
That's because you just told all those people that their opinions are facts, and people don't like to be wrong.
They don't like to be wrong. You're right. You're right. Well, and hopefully someday soon, we'll actually be able to announce appearances that we've been waiting on contracts for, but we'll see.
Well, it's weird.
That's weird. You guys are going to find out 2 weeks before we actually do any of these shows. We're going to find out 2 days before.
The episode will air the day after we were there.
Right? Be like, oh, hey, by the way, we were at a con doing a thing that we do at said con. Yeah.
That voodoo that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The guesting episode for the end of the season just gets progressively longer with all the things that have happened this year.
That's okay.
In our guesting process. But I think it'll be a good realistic picture of what this process is actually like for people.
Sure.
So it'll be a good one. Hopefully we're going to be back on track now. Hopefully. Maybe, unless one of us gets sick or something else happens, because if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Well, we're going to record yet another episode now because we're trying to
Heck yeah.
get caught up. So,
alrighty. Well, I'm Ash.
I'm Al.
We are Lavi Cosplay.
And this is Shenanigans Cosplayers Say. You've been listening to Shenanigans Cosplayers Say, produced by LVC Productions. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at Lavi Cosplay. Our podcast Instagram is Podcast SCS. Our website is lavicosplay.com. Have a fun, crazy con or cosplay related story, absurd cosplay question, or just something in general to share with us? Email us at podcastscs@gmail.com or DM us at podcastscs or Lavi Cosplay on Instagram. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, and remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should.